Ghostly faces showing up in Polaroids, UFOs floating over quiet towns, and a woman's body burned down to bone in ways science still can't fully explain. These are disturbing photos scientists wish you never saw. In May 1950, a farming couple in McMinnville, Oregon stepped outside to check on their animals. They spotted something hanging in the evening sky. Evelyn Trent yelled for her husband, Paul, to grab the camera. He managed to snap 2 quick photos before the thing drifted away. Those 2 shots ended up becoming some of the most heavily analyzed UFO images on the planet. When the negatives were examined, researchers couldn't agree on anything. Some said it really looked like a metallic object in the sky. Others said it was probably a small object hanging from a wire, but even the Air Force couldn't settle on an answer. You may not notice anything at first, but there's an extra person in one of these photos who isn't meant to be there. Let's compare this first image to the second. You see that? Now, a little context. It's 1988. Everyone's wrapping up their vacation at a hotel in Zurich, Austria, and a group decides they want one last picture together. One of them props his Canon on a nearby table, points it toward the group, sets the timer, and rushes back into place. The flash doesn't go off, so he resets it and takes a second shot. It's only when the film gets developed later that someone notices something strange in that first darker shot. There's an extra head in the frame, and it's not a face anyone in the group recognized. This blurry woman's head floating in the middle of the group like she somehow materialized up from the table. So, just who or what decided to show up in this group photo? A couple years later, after the first UFO image we talked about, another strange set of photos popped up, this time in Passaic, New Jersey in 1952. A man named George Stock claimed that he saw a domed, disc-shaped craft hovering low over his backyard in broad daylight. He ran inside, grabbed his camera, and snapped several clear shots of the object floating above the tree line before it shot upward and disappeared. Compared to most UFO pictures from the time, these weren't blurry. They were surprisingly crisp. Skeptics tried to recreate it with model airplanes, hubcaps, and pie tins tossed into the air, but nothing really matched the original images. The Air Force investigative program Project Blue Book logged the case but never reached a conclusion. And to this day, these images float between obvious hoax and one of the cleanest UFOs ever photographed, depending on who you ask. In 1964, a man named Jim Templeton took his young daughter to a marshland area near the Solway, Firth in England to snap some family photos. It was a quiet, empty place with nothing but sky, grass, and open air behind them, very idyllic. But later that day, when the images were developed, everyone did a double take when they saw this photo. Behind his daughter stood this tall figure in what looked like a white spacesuit, complete with a dark visor, positioned as if it was walking right toward them. But Jim was positive there wasn't a single person around other than he and his wife and daughter. The photo was famously checked for tampering. There were no signs it had been manipulated. Kodak even examined it and told Jim he'd certify it as authentic if he wanted. And all of this was strange enough, but then it got stranger. 2 men in dark suits visited Jim, asking him to take them to the exact spot where the strange photo was taken. When he asked what agency they were from, they wouldn't say. It came to be known as the Solway Firth Spaceman, one of the most mysterious photographs ever taken. For decades, the photo you're looking at here was missing. In August 1990, 2 hikers in Scotland claimed they saw this huge, silent, diamond-shaped craft hovering in the sky, with what looked like military jets circling it. One of the men snapped 6 photos before running off, terrified. They handed the images to a newspaper, which then passed them to the UK Ministry of Defence. And that was the last they heard. For years, researchers kept asking where the images went and why nobody could access them. Former Ministry of Defense officials later admitted they did analyze the photos, and some called them the best UFO pictures ever taken. But the photos were locked away for decades, until one print finally leaked, showing this massive diamond-shaped craft hanging in the air, just like the hikers claimed. The jets in the background made it even creepier, because if this photo is legit, the military clearly knew something was up. It's an image that definitely raises more questions than answers, and we've never been given a straight explanation. What you're looking at here, which may be blurred for YouTube, is what was left of of a Pennsylvania woman named Helen Conway in 1964. The rest of her body burnt to a crisp, leaving nothing but her lower legs. This is often cited as one of the very rare cases of spontaneous human combustion. There's still debate as to whether that even exists, but under normal conditions, burning a human body takes hours and requires temperatures you'd usually only see in a crematorium. So when someone goes from alive to ash in the time it takes to boil pasta, I mean, even the people who study this stuff admit there are gaps in what we understand. The scientific explanation that gets brought up most is something called the wick effect, where a person's own body fat melts and basically becomes the fuel for the fire. Once the fire really gets going, it burns downward and inward, like a macabre version of a candle. In Helen's case, the spark might have been a cigarette. She was known to smoke constantly. That theory makes sense, at least on paper, but it doesn't make the images of what was left any easier to look at. This photo was taken in 1968 at a spiritualist convention in Los Angeles, where Robert A. Ferguson, author of a book called Psychic Telemetry, New Key to Health, Wealth, and Perfect Living, was giving a speech. After this photo was developed, though, he noticed that standing faintly beside him is who Ferguson later identified as his brother, Walter. The thing is, Walter wasn't standing beside him while he was giving his speech. In fact, Walter wasn't even alive. He died in 1944 during World War II. But was this really Walter's ghost captured in this image? Or was this a simple case of double exposure? Well, but you don't go back and expose the same frame twice like you could with old roll film. So that makes accidental or intentional double exposure highly unlikely. This photo looks like some messed up taxidermy you'd see at a freak show, but this dog, or I guess dogs, are real and were both very much alive when this photo was taken. Soviet scientist Vladimir Demikhov had made 23 attempts to graft dogs together while keeping them alive. All had failed, but the thing he created here managed to stay alive for 4 days. As if it's not painfully obvious already, Demikhov was known for pushing into territory that made even other researchers uncomfortable. His idea was to take the head and front legs of a smaller dog and surgically attach them onto the body of a larger one, in order to see how far organ transplant techniques could go. From a medical standpoint, he wasn't doing this for shock value. He genuinely believed these experiments would help doctors understand how to keep transplanted organs alive, and in a cold scientific sense, his work did help advance transplant research, but that didn't make it any easier to look at. A lot of people at the time felt like he'd crossed a line, and that's also hard to argue with even today. This photo comes from one of the strangest nights in Los Angeles' history. It was February 24th, 1942, just months after Pearl Harbor. Everyone was on edge. Late that night, military spotters thought they saw something moving through the sky. That single report was enough to send the whole city into blackout mode. Soldiers fired more than 1,000 anti-aircraft rounds into the darkness, and the next morning the Los Angeles Times ran the photo that everyone still talks about. Searchlights from all over the city pinned on what looked like a solid shape hovering in the sky. No one could agree on what it was. Some said it had to be a weather balloon. But of course, plenty of people wondered if maybe this really was a UFO. I mean, something is hovering right in the middle of those beams. The military couldn't settle on a story either. First they said it was an enemy aircraft, then they walked that back, then everything was labeled a false alarm, but that explanation never fully satisfied anyone, because trained soldiers don't usually fire for nearly an hour in empty air. Whatever they thought they saw that night, though, they did leave behind one very strange image. What you're looking at here is photographic evidence of what became known as the Lubbock Lights. In August 1951, 3 Texas Tech professors, Dr. W.L. Ducker, Dr. A.G. Oberg, and Dr. W.I. Robinson, were sitting outside late one evening. Out of nowhere, a line of these bluish-white lights shot across the sky in a tight V formation. They moved really fast, they made no sound at all, and the formation was so perfect it didn't look like birds. I'm pretty sure the fact that they were glowing already gave that away, though. A few nights later, an 18-year-old student named Carl Hart Jr. saw the same thing and managed to get his camera out in time. He snapped 5 photos, and those shots eventually landed on the Air Force's desk as part of Project Blue Book. The Air Force tried to explain it away as birds catching reflections from streetlights, but when they tried recreating the effect themselves, they couldn't get anything close to Hart's photos. And people around Lubbock kept reporting these same lights, so What were they? The Air Force never came out with a definitive answer. I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.